Good morning.
Good morning,
Miss Lily.
How's everyone?
Fine.
Good. Okay, so today we're going to continue reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and we will start, excuse me, we will start on page 189 of the PDF. Okay, so if you remember, Atticus is questioning Mayella because he knows that she has lied about something, okay? So he's trying to prove that there was no way that Tom Robinson could have attacked her and beat her and choked her with only the use of one arm, okay? Don't forget to sign in. All right, so let's see. Hannah Yasser, would you read, please?
Yes, of course, Miss Lynn. Miss, could you, from
Okay, let's go here. Mayella first tells him,
yes,
I told you what happened.
yes, of course. I told you what happened. You testified that you turned around and there he was. He choked you then? Yes. Then he released your throat and hit you. I said he did. He blackened your left eye with his right fist. I ducked and it glanced. That's what it did. That's what it did. I ducked and it glanced off. Mayla had finally seen the light. You're becoming suddenly clear on the point. A while ago you couldn't remember too well, could you? I said he hit me. All right. He choked you, he hit you, and then he raped you. That right? It certainly is. You're a strong girl. What were you doing all the time? Just standing there? I told you. Hollered and kicked and fought. Atticus reached up and took off his glasses, turned his good right eye to the witness, and rained questions on her. Judge Taylor said, "One question at a time, Atticus. Give the witness a chance to answer." All right. Why didn't you run? I tried. Tried to. What kept you from it? He slung me down. That's what he did. He slung me down and got on top of me. You were screaming all this time? I certainly was. Then why didn't the other children hear you? Where were they? At the dump? Where were they? No answer. Why didn't your screams make them come running? The dump's closer than the woods, isn't it? No answer. Or didn't you scream until you saw your father in the window? You didn't think to scream until then, did you? No answer. Did you scream first at your father instead of at Tom Robinson? Was that it? No answer. Who beat you up? Tom Robinson or your father? No answer. What did your father see in the window? The crime of rape or the best defense to it? Why don't you tell the truth, child? Didn't Bob Ewell beat you up? When Atticus turned away from Mayella, he looked like his stomach hurt, but Mayella's face was a mixture of terror and fury. Atticus sat down wearily and polished his glasses with his handkerchief. Suddenly, Mayella became articulate. I got something to say, she said. Atticus raised his head. Do you want to tell us what happened? But she did not hear the confession in his invitation. I got something to say, and then I ain't gonna say no more. That nigger yonder took advantage of me, and if you fine fancy gentlemen don't wanna do nothing about it, then you're all yellow, stinking cowards, the lot of you. Your fancy airs don't come to nothing. Your ma'am, I mean, and Miss Mayella, your Mayellern don't come to nothing. Sorry, Mr. Finch. Then she burst into real tears. Her shoulders shook with anger, sobs. She was as good as her word. She answered no more questions, even when Mr. Glimmer tried to get her back on track. I guess if she hadn't been so poor and ignorant, Judge Taylor would have put her under the jail for the contempt she had shown everybody in the courtroom. Somehow, Atticus had hit her hard in a way that was not clear to me, but it gave him no pleasure to do so. He sat with his head down, and I never saw anybody glare at anyone with the hatred Mayella showed when she left the stand and walked by Atticus's table. When Mr. Glimmer told Judge Taylor that that the state rested, Judge Taylor said, "It's time we all did. We'll take 10 minutes." Atticus and Mr. Glimmer met in front of the bench and whispered. Then they left the courtroom by a door behind the witness stand, which was a signal for us all to stretch. I discovered that I had been sitting on the edge of the long bench, and I was somewhat numb. Jem got up and yawned. Dill did likewise, and Reverend Sykes wiped his face on his hat. The temperature was an easy 90, he said. Mr. Braxton Underwood, who had been sitting quietly in a chair reserved for the press, soaking up testimony with his sponge of brain, allowed his bitter eyes to rove over the colored balcony, and they met mine. He gave a snort and looked away. Jem, I said, Mr. Underwood's seen us. That's okay. He won't tell Atticus. He'll just put it on the social side of the Tribune. Jem turned back to Dill, explaining, I suppose, the finer points of the trial to him, but I wondered what they were. There had been no lengthy debates between Atticus and Mr. Glimmer on any points. Mr. Glimmer seemed to be prosecuting almost reluctantly. Witnesses had been led by the nose as assess or with few objections. But Atticus had once told us that in Judge Taylor's court, any lawyer who was a strict constructionist on evidence usually wound up receiving strict instructions from the bench. He this for me to mean that Judge Taylor might look crazy and operate in his sleep, but he was seldom reversed, and that was proof of the pudding. Atticus said he was a good judge. Presently, Judge Taylor returned and climbed into his swivel chair. He took a cigar from his vest pocket and examined it thoughtfully. I punched Dill. Having passed the judge's inspection, the cigar suffered a vicious bite. We come down sometimes to watch him, I explained. It's gonna take him the rest of the afternoon now. You watch. Unaware of public scrutiny from above, Judge Taylor disposed of the severe end by propelling it expertly to his lips and saying, "Fuck." He hit a spittoon so squarely we could hear it slosh. Bet he was hell with a spitball, murmured Dill. As a rule, a recess meant a general exodus, but today people weren't moving. Even the idlers, who had failed to shame younger men from their seats, had remained standing along the walls. I guess Mr. Hectate had reserved the county toilet for court officials.
Okay,
Atticus
Hannah.
and Mr. Glimmer returned.
Hannah, you can stop.
Okay.
I
Okay.
briefly explained their important points to us.
At first, Atticus was questioning Mayella, and bit by bit he was uh, reaching the questions to a point where it was the truth. He wanted to, although he asked for the truth from her, and in his questions there was the truth in his questions, but then she refused to answer because because like it was her father who did it, and she did not want to say the truth whatever. And then she
Exactly.
got to a point where she reached her limit, and she uh, she claimed that she claimed and did that she would not answer anymore, except until she said like they were not going, if they were not going to um get her rights, they are then she cussed at them. But uh but although she was at her limit, it wasn't because she was in she was wronged. It was because her lie had been exposed. And then after she burst into tears, she left the she this time she burst into real tears. She wasn't acting anymore because Atticus had hit her hard, as Atticus had hit her hard. Then after she left, uh, Mr. Glimmer said that they will have a 10-minute break, which is for discussion usually for about the case. Then uh, then Scout and Scout Dill and Reverend Yawn, Scout and Dill yawned because Scout did not understand, did not fully understand what was going on. Dill also yawned, and Reverend Psych wiped his face in his hat. She said the temperature was an easy 90, which means it's like you can say like it's fully like it reaches 90, it reaches 90 degrees. And then Mr. Braxton Underwood, uh the Mr. The one who was collecting information for the press, or as you can say, a reporter. um he his and Scout's eye had met, and then she was worried that he would go snitch on her and tell Atticus that Jem and Dill are there. But then Jem calmed calmed her curiosity by saying that he won't. He will just uh, he will just sit there until he will just put it on the social side of the Tribune. Then uh Miss, can you hear me? Hello,
Yes, I can hear you, baby.
Miss Lynn. Oh
Yes.
yes, yes, sorry. Then after then they returned sorry. Oh yes, sorry. Then without further ado, uh, they had already returned to the courtroom, and Judge Taylor's and then Atticus made it clear to Scout that Judge Taylor, although he might seem as a slacker, but if the lawyer is distinct in his evidence, Judge Taylor will return it uh, tenfold. Um, which mean I mean that Judge Taylor will treat him by the evidence that he got, and by the evidence that he got. If the evidence fully if they
If the
like
evidence was very strong.
yes, like if the evidence was like strong, as you said, he would mark the case on his side. But if the lawyer wasn't good enough, and he didn't give enough evidence, then the Judge Taylor wouldn't wouldn't pass his judgment. Pass his judge. Sorry. I meant like if evidence was good enough, Judge Taylor would pass his judgment rightfully on uh, um, on the lawyer and his defendant. But if the evidence wasn't strong enough, then they won't be able to win the case.
Right.
Because Judge Taylor was an upright judge, although this wasn't the surface of things.
Correct.
And then Judge Taylor took out a cigar, and he seemed to scout that he was a professional um, at using those cigars, which meant he always used cigars. And then Scout continues to tell that he is gonna it's gonna take him the rest of the afternoon. Now you watch,
Okay.
because they always go down and watch him take the cigar.
Right. Thank you, Hannah. Good job.
Thank you, Miss Lynn.
That was a little part that was kind of hard to explain. I want you, everyone, to notice where it says right here that Mr. Gilmer at this point seemed to be prosecuting almost reluctantly. What it means here when Scout says this is that Mr. Gilmer has realized that Mayella had lied. So he's very reluctant or hesitant about representing her, but he has no choice. He has to continue on because that is his client. I would like everyone to unmute themselves, please. All right, Abdullah, would you read, please?
Yeah, starting rooms.
Yeah, right here where it's highlighted.
Okay. Atticus and Mr. Gilmer returned, and Judge Taylor looked at his watch. "It's getting on to 4, he said, which was intriguing. The courthouse clock must have struck the hour at least twice. I had not heard it or felt its vibrations. "Shall we try to wind up this afternoon?" asked Judge Taylor. "How about it, Atticus?" "I think we can," said Atticus. "How many witnesses you got?" "One." "We'll call him." Chapter 19. Thomas Robinson reached around, ran his fingers under his left arm and lifted it. He guided his arm to the Bible, and his rubber-like left hand sought contact with the black binding. As he raised his right hand, the useless one slipped off the Bible and hit the clerk's table. He was trying again when Judge Taylor growled, "That'll do, Tom." Tom took the oath and stepped into the witness chair. Atticus very quickly induced him to tell us. Tom was 25 years of age. He was married with 3 children. He had been in trouble with the law before. He once received 30 days for disorderly conduct. "It must have been disorderly," said Atticus. "What did it consist of?" "Got in a fight with another man. He tried to cut me."
Okay, Abdullah, stop right there for 1 second. All right, now we know that Tom Robinson is 25 years old. He's married with 3 children, and he had been in trouble with the law before. One time he had to spend 30 days in jail for disorderly conduct. What was that disorderly conduct? He got into a fight with another man who tried to cut me with a knife, of course. Okay, go ahead, Abdullah. I'm sorry. Right here.
Did he succeed? Yes, a little. Not enough to hurt. You see, Tom moved his left shoulder. "Yes," said Atticus. "You were both convicted?" Yes, I had to serve because I couldn't pay the fine. Other fellow paid his now." Dale learned across me and asked Jim what Atticus was doing. Jim said Atticus was showing the jury that Tom had nothing to hide. Were you acquainted with Mayella Violet Arrow? Asked Atticus. Yes, I had to pass to her place. I had to pass her place going to and from the field every day. Whose field? I pick for Mr. Link Diaz. Were you picking cotton in November? No, I works in his yard fall and winter time. I works pretty steady for him all year round. He's got a lot of pecan trees and things. You say you had to pass the able place to get to and from work. Is there any way? Is there any other way to go? No, none I know of. Tom, did she ever speak to you? Yes. Why, yes. I tip my hat when I go by, and one day she asked to come inside the fence and bust up a chiffer rope for her. When did she ask you to chop up the chiffer rope? Mr. Finch, it was my last spring. I remember it was because chopping time, and I had my hoe with me. I said I didn't have nothing but this hoe, but she said she had a hatchet. She gave me the hatchet, and I broke up the chiffer rope. She said, I reckon I'll have to give you a nickel, won't I?" And I said, "No, ma'am, there ain't no charge." Then I went home, Mr. Finch. That was way last spring, way over a year ago. Did you ever go to the place again? Yes. When? Well, I went lots of times. Dutch Taylor instinctively reached for his gravel, but let his hand fall. The murmur below us died without his help. Under what circumstances? Please, why did you go inside the fence lots of times? Tom Robinson's forehead relaxed. She'd call me in, seemed like every time. I passed by under, she'd have some little something for me to do, chopping, kindling, toting water for her. She watered them red flowers every day. Were you paid for your services? No, not after she offered me a nickel for the first time. I was glad to do it. Mr. Arrow didn't seem to help her none, and neither did the children. And I know she didn't have no nickels to spare. Where were the other children? They was always around all over the place. They'd match me work. Some of them sat in the window. Would Miss Mayella talk to you? Yes, sir, she talked to me. As Tom Robinson gave his testimony, it came to me that Mayella must have been the loneliest person in the world. She was even lonelier than Boo Radley, who had not been out of the house in 25 years. When Atticus asked if she had any friends, she seemed not to know what he meant. Then she thought he was making fun of her. She was as sad as I thought, as what Jim called a mixed child. White people wouldn't have anything to do with her because she lived among pigs. Negroes wouldn't have anything to do with her because she was white. She she couldn't live like Mr. Dolphus Raymond, who preferred the company of Negroes. She didn't own a river bank, and she wasn't from a fine old family. Nobody asked. That's just their way about the hills. Maycomb gave them Christmas baskets, welfare money, and the back of his hand. Tom Robinson was probably the only person who was ever decent to her. But she said that he took advantage of her, and when she stood up, she looked at him as if he were dirt beneath her feet.
Okay, Abdullah. All right, so just briefly give us some important points that you read.
That Mrs. Yeah, the Ewa was very lonely, and that there was nobody beside her.
Okay.
And that she had no friends. And
Right. We find out that she had no friends, and Scout said that she thought she was even lonelier than Boo Radley was in her life. We also find out in the beginning when Abdullah started to read that after the part about Tom Robinson had been in, he had to go to jail. And the reason he had to go to jail and the other man that he got in the fight with did not have to go to jail because the other man had enough money to pay his fine. So he did not have to spend time in jail. Tom Robinson did not have money to pay his fine. So they made him stay in jail for 30 days. And then next we find out Tom Robinson says that Mayella Ewell had invited him, many times to come into her yard. And that he always did. The first time she offered him a nickel, but after that he didn't get any money because he said he enjoyed helping her because it seemed like her father wouldn't help her. None of the other children in the family would help. So he enjoyed helping her do different things. And Atticus asked where were the other children, and he told him they were all around, all over the place. They would watch him work, and some of them would even sit in the window and watch him. So he asked him, would Miss Mayella talk to you? And Tom Robinson says, yes, sir, she talked to me. And this is when Scout seems to be thinking that Mayella must be the loneliest person in the world, even lonelier than Boo Radley, who had not been out of the house in 25 years. And like Abdullah said, when Atticus asked her about friends, she didn't even seem to know what he meant by that. She thought that he was making fun of her. So Scout thinks this is very sad, okay, because she thought about what Jim had said. She was a mixed child and that white people wouldn't have anything to do with her because of how she lived. She lived among the pigs because they were such dirty people. And the Negroes wouldn't have anything to do with her because she was white, okay? And then she goes on to say about at Christmas time, Macomb would give them Christmas baskets. They received welfare money. Tom Robinson is probably, Scout says, or thinks to herself, the only person who was ever decent to her, okay? But she said that he took advantage of her, okay? And when she got up to leave the witness stand, she looked at him and gave him a look as if he were the dirt beneath her feet, okay? Afan Magdi, would you read, please? Right here. Afan, can you hear me? Pamika, would you read, please?
Yes, just then 1 second.
Okay. You can start right here, baby. Can you see the screen, Pamika?
Yes.
Okay, start right here, please.
Did you ever, Atticus interrupted my meditations, at any time go to the evil property? Did you ever set a foot on the evil property without an express invitation from one of them? No, sir, Mr. French, I never did. I wouldn't do that, sir. Atticus sometimes said that one way to tell whether a witness was lying or telling the truth was to listen rather than watch. I applied his test. Tom denied it 3 times in one breath, but quietly with no hint of whining in his voice, and I found myself believing him in spite of protesting too much. He seemed to be a respectable Negro, and a respectable Negro would never go up in somebody's yard of his own violation. Tom, what happened to you on the evening of November 21st of last year? Below us, the spectators drew a collective breath and leaned forward. Behind us, the Negroes did the same. Tom was a black velvet Negro, not shiny, but soft black velvet. The whites of his eyes shone in his face, and when he spoke, we saw flashes of his teeth. If he had been whole, he would have been a fine specimen of a man. Mr. Finch, he said, I was going home as usual that evening. When I passed the evil place, Miss Mayella were in the porch like she said she were. It seemed real quite like I didn't know why. I was studying why. Just passing by when she says for me to come there and help her for a minute. Well, I went inside the fence and looked around for some kindling to work on, but I didn't see none, and she says, now I got something for you to do in the house. The old door's off its hinges and falling coming on pretty fast. I said, you got a screwdriver, Miss Mayella? She said she should had. Well, I went up the steps and she motioned me to come inside. And I went in the front room and looked at the door. I said, Miss Mayella, this door look all right. I pulled it back and forth, and those hinges was still right. Then she shut the door in my face. Mr. Finch, Mr. Finch, I was wondering why it was so quiet like, and it come to me that there weren't a chill on the place, not a one of them. And I said, Miss Mayella, were you chillin'? Tom's black velvet skin had begun to shine, and he ran his hand over his face. I say, were you chillin'? He continued, and she says she was laughing. Sort of, she says they are all gone to town to get ice creams. She took me a slab beer to 7 nickels, but I done it. They all are gone to town. Tom's discomfort was not from the humidity. What did you say then, Tom? Asked Atticus. I said something like, why, Miss Mayella, that's right, something owe you to treat them, and she said, you think so? I don't think she understood what I was thinking. I meant it was smart of her to save like that, and nice of her to treat them. I understand you, Tom. Go on, said Atticus. Well, I said, I must be going. I couldn't do nothing for her, and she says, oh yes, I could. And I ask her what, and she says to step on the chair, wander and get that box down from the top of the shiffer rope. Not the same shiffer rope you busted up? Asked Atticus. The witness smiled. Nah, that another one. Most as tall as the room, so I done what she told me. And I was reaching when the next thing I knew, she'd grab me round my legs, grab me round the legs. Mr. Finch, she scared me so bad I hopped down and turned the chair over. That was the only furniture disturbed in that room. Mr. Finch, when I left it, I swear, for God. What happened after you turned the chair over? Tom Robinson had come to a stop. He glanced at Atticus, then at the jury, then at Mr. Underwood sitting across the room. Tom, you've sworn to tell the whole truth. Will you tell it? Tom ran his hand nervously over his mouth. What happened after that? Answer the question, said Judge Taylor. 1/3 of his cigar had vanished. Mr. Finch, I got down, offered the chair, turned around, and she sort of jumped on me. Jumped on you? Violently? No, she hugged me. She hugged me around the waist. This time, Judge Taylor Gable came down with a bang, and as it did, the overhead lights went on the courtroom.
Darkness had not come, but the afternoon sun had left the windows. Judge Taylor quickly restored order. Then what did she do? The witness swallowed hard. She up and kissed me, side of the face. She says she never kissed a grown man before, and she might as well kiss a nigger. She says what her papa do to her don't count. She says, "Kiss me back, nigger." I say, "Miss Mayella, let me out of here," and tried to run, but she got her back to the door, and I had to push her. I didn't want to harm her, Mr. French, and I say, "Let me pass." But just when I say it, Mr. Evil yonder hollered through the window. What did he say? Tom Robinson swallowed again, and his eyes widened. Something not fitting to say, not fitting for these folks and chillin' to hear. What did he say, Tom? You must tell the jury what he said. Tom Robinson shut his eyes tight. He says, "You got them. I'll kill you." Then what happened? Mr. Finch, I was running so fast I didn't know what happened. Tom, did you rape my Elo? I did not, sir. Did you harm her in any way? I did not, sir. Did you resist her advances? Mr. Finch, I tried to stop being ugly to her. I didn't want to be ugly. I didn't want to push her or nothing. It occurred to me that in their own way, Tom Robinson's manners were as good as Agnes, until my father explained to me later. I did not understand the subtlety of Tom's predicament. He would not have dared strike a white woman under any circumstances and expect to live long. So he took the first opportunity to run, a sure sign of guilt. Tom, go back once more to Mr. Evil, said Atticus. Did he say anything to you? Not anything, sir. He might said something, but I weren't there. That'll do. Atticus and sharply. What did you hear? Who was he talking to? Mr. Finch. He were talking and looking at Miss Marilla. Then you ran. I should did, sir. Why did you run?
Okay, Bamika, stop there, baby. All right, so what have we learned so far here?
Atticus was trying to question Tom Robinson what happened that day, and Tom Robinson said that he was going to Mayalla's house, and he says that Mayalla asked him to come in and help him do something.
Guys, someone's making noise. Please stop. Go ahead, Bamika.
And do something, but when he went inside, there was nothing to do. Everything was fixed. So then she asked him to get something from the cupboard up. He climbed up to get it, but then she grabbed him and tried to. Then Tom Robinson tried to run away, but then Mr. Evil came and he was talking and looking at Miss Mayella. That's all. So important part.
So we find out here that Tom Robinson says that it was Mayella that grabbed him and started kissing him first. And he was very afraid. Why? If you notice what Bamika read in the last part, when Scout says, it occurred to me that in their own way, Tom Robinson's manners were as good as Atticus. Until my father explained to me later, I did not understand the subtlety of Tom's predicament. He would not have dared strike a white woman under any circumstances and expect to live long. You have to remember during this time, he would have done that